Spider-Noir. This will be a spoiler review. I have a review over on my blog, soundedbettermyhead.com. It's mostly spoiler-free. I try not to get too many crazy details on there. I am giving this season a 3 out of 5. I was tempted to give it a 3.5, but it wasn't that great, but it was solid. I think it's a really solid detective show, kind of doing that noir kind of 1940s era New York. The superhero aspect, I think, is where it falls flat a little bit. Like, if you look at like Jessica Jones was a good job of doing, like, she's a detective mostly, but she's got superpowers, and I think it kind of leaned more into her being a detective. And then when they did the superhero stuff, it also worked. I think the superhero stuff fell a little bit flatter in Spider-Noir. Thought the plot was interesting. I thought there was a lot of different mysteries, and it's like a lot of the stuff feels unrelated at first. It's like, okay, he's hired to find this guy, and then he's hired to get photos on a cheating wife, and how those cases end up being connected, and how that connects to everything else that's going around, the people with the superpowers, and that the way the information was revealed worked really well. It helps that he's a very competent detective. Like, thank God he's not, like, I don't want to say a bumbling detective, but like, he's so out of it, or he's drunk and he's just not picking up on the clues. Like, no, he knows what he's doing. So I think, it kind of helps to get through pull all this shit together really well, because you see him, investigating and trying to figure out what's going on. And you also got the other, you got Robbie Robinson is doing his thing, and you got Janet, the secretary, is doing her thing, and just said it works. Everybody's pretty competent, and it's a pretty elaborate story, and it just pretty naturally all comes together. There is some weird pacing issues. Like, sometimes something would be seemingly important, and it just kind of glosses over it. Like, on the first episode, Ben Reilly's working with another PI for a little bit. He ends up getting captured by Superman's goons, and then Superman ends up killing the guy. And it seemed like kind of a big deal. Like, the dude you were working with just got murdered by this gangster, so that means you're in trouble. So, these guys are gonna be after you. And it's like just kind of glossed over. Like, there was a point where he does mention that the guy got killed, but it's like it should have been more dramatic. Like, he should have found the body. I think, like, oh shit, this guy got killed. Instead, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, the other guy got killed. Like, I don't know, it just seemed like an important moment that was just kind of glossed over. And there's a few other examples of that where it's like, okay, it's building towards. I mean, like, there was a point where it was a real dramatic thing that the mayor was trying to get in touch with Ben Reilly, and then it's completely blown off. It's not even like Reilly says, I'm not talking to him because X, Y, and Z. I want to avoid him. It's like, okay, Reilly's like, whatever, and it just doesn't really come up again until the mayor finally bumps into him. And it's just a couple weird beats like that kind of throw you. And then sometimes we're kind of slow down for other stuff. Like, I know what they were trying to show. There was a scene where Robbie's taking the subway to Harlem, and he starts off with, he's like the only black dude on the train, and after somebody stops, you see, like, there's no white people left. Just to kind of show where he's heading. But then he just kind of cuts off once he cuts off the subway and goes on to something else. And it just seems like it's a throwaway scene all of a sudden. I think if we would have kept that, and then you see him directly going to look for, I think he was looking for Tombstone at the time. That feels better. Instead it's just kind of like, okay. Then it just jumps to something, going back to Ben Reilly again. But it's mostly minor complaints. It wasn't like I was watching it just completely threw me. It's just a couple points where the pacing was like, what was happening? Character-wise, Nick Cage is doing his best Nick Cage. If you don't like Nicolas Cage's overacting kind of style or over-the-top acting style, you're not going to probably like this show. He's intentionally doing, he says it's a 70% Humphrey Bogart impression, 30% Bugs Bunny impression. And you could definitely see the Bogart stuff. There's an explanation later on in the film where he mentions that after he got his powers, it's basically his brain's been rewired to be more like a spider, so he has to watch actors and kind of learn how to be human again. So that makes sense eventually, but you don't find that out till pretty late in the show. But again, Nick Cage, sometimes he's just too over the top. Sometimes it works. Sometimes some of the stuff he's on is just funny, and it's just like you roll with it. and then sometimes it's just a little too much, especially late. When you start seeing how his powers make him automatically do these weird spider poses, it just looks corny. And it's like even Nick Cage can't like make it look like presentable. It's just like, okay, that's just a little too goofy. I think sometimes when he goes undercover, I think he overdoes it a bit too, acting like he's crazy or he's whatever. Just it's a little too over the top. It's still kind of funny, but it's a little over the top. And I said, the detective stuff is great. The superhero stuff is not so much. And then for some reason, it seems like half the time he tries to do something superhero related without the costume on. He's old, he's struggling, he's falling over stuff a little bit. But when he's got the mask on, he's suddenly more competent. And then it just seems like a weird... It doesn't seem like, it's balanced right, I guess. I don't know what the right word would be right now. Robbie Robinson, solid character. He's a super competent reporter. He brings a little bit of like of his own humor to it. They gave him just enough stuff to do where he's not like he feels important to the story. He's not like a distraction. So I think he's great. I think Janet's a good character. It's exactly what her role needs to be. The secretary that's looking out for him, but she also is competent and she's she knows what she's doing. Black Cat Cat Hardy is fine. Solid femme fatale character. Doesn't have much to do at all with Felicia Hardy, the Black Cat. Just basically the name. I don't know much about the Spider-Noir comics. I think Felicia Hardy there is it's called the White Widow. So either way, this version of the Cat Hardy really has nothing to do with Felicia Hardy in any reality, except a variation of the name. So that's a little disappointing. I wish a little bit some more play on her being the Black Cat. As you get into the villains, I thought Silverman was solid. I think in the comics he gets way out of. He's taking like an anti-aging serum. Eventually he's got a cyborg body. Then he's a brain in a jar. This is just a grounded version. He's just kind of this Irish kind of gangster. He's got a lot of flavor to him. I thought he was interesting every time he was on screen. Brendan Gleeson does a really good job bringing this guy to life. Sandman was decent. Power-wise, it's pretty weak. It's just usually 99% of the time he had this little prosthetics on his face. It didn't even look like sand. It looked like more like cement. And then when he powered up, it didn't even look yellow like sand like you expect. It was more like a white sand. So it never really looked like the Sandman. And I said he never really expanded beyond my fists are covered with sand. Like he wasn't like making big giant balls with his hand or anything like this, the comic book Sandman would do, or even like the movie version. But he was a decent character. I think Tombstone was also kind of bland. I mean, again, it wasn't a bad character, and the actor did a good job. Just traditionally, he's got the white skin and it's indestructible. Here, they try to look like some kind of I don't know what kind of animal was supposed to be. He had some kind of weird skin markings. He literally looked more like a Star Trek alien than Tombstone. So I thought that was just not a very visually appealing appearance on him. Kind of a wild card introduced later in the season. He's not really part of the main cast. Was Megawatt. I think his character was annoying, but at least his powers a little bit more interesting. He's basically like a budget rate Electro. The last episode or two, he really became like a real big thorn at everybody's side. Basically, he was really kind of stirring shit up, and I think with his personality at that point, it worked. Him kind of muscling in on Silvermane's territory, and him kind of I don't have to listen to anybody because of my powers. And then seeing him using his powers pretty dangerously, he was starting to become a little bit more interesting. So he was kind of a late season addition that I didn't like at first, and at the very end, I was like, okay, he's really kind of adding something dangerous to it for everybody. I think that's about the gist of the characters. Some other people coming and going, but that's, I think, the most important stuff. The show, I think it looks pretty good overall. And they got the cars and the buildings and the props and the outfits, everything you would expect from this era, of New York. The CG is not the greatest. The city shots where you could tell, like, it's not even that it looks like it's CG. Sometimes it looks like it's a cartoon. It just doesn't, or like a video game cutscene. Just doesn't quite work. A lot of the Spider-Man stuff when he's swinging isn't always the greatest. I think there's one shot where it's pretty far away and he's kind of running from on the building tops and jumps and grabs something. It looked animated. It just doesn't have to move how like a real person would. Now I know it's supposed to be a Spider-Man, but it doesn't even have like Spider-Man movements. It just looks like a video game character or a cartoon character trying to move across a rooftop. Even like there's a couple shots where you're on a roof and there's a big balcony and you can see the sky so clearly. And this, if you keep, it's a little distracting. It doesn't look like a single cloud moves. Just the cloud's just static. Like, I don't know, it's like a matte painting or it's a green screen or whatever it was. It's just like, kind of caught my eye. Like, that's not moving. But that takes me to the show's also released in color and black and white. I happen to see that episode in color. I think it might have not been as noticeable in black and white. And a couple of the clips that I did see, some of the stuff does look better in black and white. Like I said, I watched some episodes in both versions. I like the color to the degree. I like, especially the higher end stuff, like Silvermane's Club and some of the nicer suits. Like the seeing those splashier colors, you really get to feel like, this is expensive. And the black and white works really for the noir stuff, but it works good for like the city stuff and like the kind of drab streets of the Depression era. I think that stuff works better. There's a really decent like kind of comic booky shots, but it's also kind of noir where it's split screens and it's kind of showing different stuff. I think a lot of that stuff would work better in the black and white, but it's not bad in color either. But I got some notes. Let me see if there's anything else I want to point out here. Not too much about the first episode. A little small thing I like is that it only comes up in this episode, but he's a fantastic photographer, and I think this makes me think kind of like Peter Parker. Peter Parker's known being a photographer, and I thought that was a nice little nod to that. If it was intentional, I don't know. There's another one that was I don't know if it was a logic jump or plot placing thing. There's a point where Riley's in his office talking to some goon, and then he leaves, and the other PI gets in his car and follows him to like where he's going, and then you see him sitting outside. I'm like, all right. And then suddenly Riley's like inside the house, like eavesdropping. I'm like, well, when did he get there? Like, why did he have this guy follow him? Did the guy running call him on the phone, say this is where they're at? It was just like a weird jump. Like, wait, I thought the other guy was following him. In the second episode, again, I already pointed out some of the them just glossing over the other PI getting killed. There was a shot of like a bridge, and I saw this in color, and it just looks so fake. Like, obviously it's got to be recreated for that era, but it just did not look real. I seen a clip of it in black and white. I thought it looked a lot better. So again, I think the black and white kind of hides some of the flaws and the effects. Also, I figured this show would be building towards him becoming the Spider again at the final episode. Like, he finally has to suit back up. I was pleasantly surprised that in late episode 2, he finally puts the costume back on. You still rarely see him in it, but at least, I'm glad to see that back on the table for like a Spider-Man show. Episode 3, there's a point where he's undercover and he's interrogating all these cops to try to figure out, who sent him on this raid. Again, sometimes it gets a little over the top, but it's just showing that he's pretty competent at the job and he knows exactly what he's doing. I think it works. A really cool scene was he breaks into Silvermane's room at night. He's got the light up goggles on. And I've seen this episode in black and white, so I think this worked even better. It's pitch black. The door creaks. He cuts the lights off. When he realizes it's the coast is clear, they cut back on, but now he's on the ceiling upside down. So that was a nice little touch. I'm not sure how I felt about the spider sense here. It's supposedly like someone got a headache, and you always see him grabbing like the back of his neck. Like, it just doesn't quite sell that it's spider sense, but at least it is showing that something's going on that's similar. I like the way he framed Silvermane's goon. I thought that was really well executed, and there was enough that you could kind of follow around. Like, they tried to make you think that he was screwed, but it's like you also could tell that with his confidence, that he had something up his sleeve. I thought the ending was stupid though. They did this like cliffhanger where somebody gets shot and you don't know who it is, and then you come back, it's like, no, they just shot one of the other goons, and it was a cheap cliffhanger. It's like, oh my god, somebody got shot. Okay, it was some random guy that was in the background. Little weird moment was, Kat and Ben are hitting it off pretty good. and then he fights Megawatt, and he stares at her, and somehow she figures out from him staring at her, like, oh, this is Ben Reilly. Like, I don't know, I thought that was a jump, and then she does see that his face is beat up a little bit when she sees him a little bit later, and he doesn't have a good excuse for it. But then she does the Lois Lane from Superman 2 to Donner cut and just throws herself out the window. He's like, well, either I'm right and he catches me, or I'm wrong and I die. And he obviously he saves her, but it's like, man, that was a pretty big logic jump for her. And it just seemed like clearly an homage to the Superman 2, especially at the Donner cut, where she does throw herself out of a window. Other than that, it was a nice scene, but just a little rushed. And then you get episode 5, was basically his origin. The de-aging was not the greatest, but it was fine. You don't focus on his face for too much. Really weird twist that he was bit by a man spider, I guess. And again, the whole weird thing about his jerky movements comes into play. And again, they do kind of explain that later on about it's more based on how spiders move their limbs, but it still just comes off a little too over the top. Then they do hint that his name is not Ben Reilly, it's actually something else, which makes total sense because if you know the comics, Peter Parker got cloned, and the second one took him an alias of Ben Reilly. Ben after his Uncle Ben, and Reilly after Aunt May's maiden name. So they call Spider-Noir in the show Ben Reilly is kind of weird because Ben Reilly is not really a character per se. It's like a made-up name that someone took as an alias. So it's kind of a nice touch that, yes, it's an alias. For whatever reason, the show doesn't want to use Peter Parker, or can't use Peter Parker. Now, there was a funny line at the end of that episode where Electro ends up, or Megawatt kills a cop after doing this whole weird speech, and Superman just kind of like, that was weird, and it was, and it just made me laugh. They did the whole little sequence where it's kind of trippy. He's like they're trying to put him under, so they could just operate on him, and then a lot of the effects just look mediocre. It wasn't a bad sequence, but just a lot of the stuff, especially when he was sort of really supposed to be really small, it just looked fake. It just didn't really quite work for me. It kind of took me out of it a little bit, but I kind of get what they were trying to go for. Episode 7. Another small one is like they go and they start robbing, Superman's goons start robbing the mayor's campaign funds. And immediately Mayor shows up. Like, they're giving it to my opponent. I'm like, I know they said that they were going to give it to the opponent behind their closed doors, but it was a weird jump for him just to say that's what they're doing with it. It's like, well, how do you know that? And there's another weird thing. There's a couple moments where they mention that he drinks too much, but it never feels like a guy that's like alcoholic. It's like, okay, yeah, I was getting drunk on the other side of town. My girl got killed. Here's the part where he gets drunk in this bar, and it's the problem. There's a sequence later on where you see he's drunk a lot, and doesn't even realize that Janet saw him, as the spider. But it never feels like a guy that's got an alcohol problem. It just seems like there should be other points in the show where like he fucked something up because he was drunk or the alcohol, and then there should be a point where he's like, okay, I gotta stay off the booze. So it was a weird thing that it's like they didn't want to commit to him to being drunk. They only did it when it was affected the story. And speaking of Janet, I thought it was obvious that everybody knew that she knew he was a spider by some of the dialogue early in the season, and then find out like, no, he didn't know that she knew until like episode 7. And then was that kind of funny bit where she kept catching him in costume, and he's like got the mask on, he's singing about being the spider, and guess he was too drunk to like really remember it though, which is weird. I like the ending of that episode and the little cliffhanger where it's like you got all these split screens, and you get the mayor and Sylvia, Silvermane's men all figuring out at the same time. All this how stuff's connected, and then they're both like, all right, we both need Ben Reilly. So I thought that was a nice little cliffhanger of like, okay, but now both sides want this guy. Like it's gonna get interesting again. Final episode, one little touch I liked. There's a point where Megawatt's in a car talking, and you look at the reflection in the mirror, you could see the like light up where his skin's lit up. And I don't think there was anything practical on set because I don't see anything reflecting on his clothes on the car. So that's someone had to put that in as like as an effect. So I thought that was a nice little touch that someone was paying attention. Like, yeah, you would see the reflection in the mirror or in the window. There's another part that threw me. Riley was gonna make a phone call, and they get him a phone, and they pick up a phone from the other side of the room and carry it over there. And there's no cord. This is 1940s. There's no, maybe even the 30s. I don't remember the exact date. Everything's plugged in. You can't just hand someone a phone. I don't know if it was a mistake or maybe there was a safety issue. They were worried about someone tripping over the cord, but it just kind of caught me. I was like, wait, where's the cord? It was a tiny bit anticlimactic the way Cat took down Silvermane. It was just like them talking shit to each other. She shot out like mirrors, and then she finally gets the real one. There's no danger. She just shoots and kills him. Like, I thought there was a little bit more to it than that. You know, the only thing that worked is the way their relationship was kind of played off decently and ended there, you know, I don't want to say poetically, but satisfactory. I also like the final fight where he gets his mask ripped. Just reminded me of like a lot of classic Spider-Man stories. They've done it in the movies where his mask is ripped enough where you see some of his face, so you can see, you know, the actor, especially in the movies, because you can see the actor like see his expression, but still kind of keep that mask on. And again, they did it a lot in the comic, so it's always a nice touch. It was a tiny bit anticlimactic the way he took out Megawatt, but it was fine. And you knew he was never going to take the cure himself, so it works out that he gave it to Flynn, Sandman. And then the end was okay. They just wrapped it up nicely. I'm hoping they do another season. They haven't said anything. The very last shot looked a little cheesy. Like, the effects didn't look that great. He shot the hat with his web shooter and pulled it in. And just looked like it was CG. I don't know. It seemed like it's something you could have just did with a string. So either it just didn't look right on film, or they just tried to CG it and it was noticeable. But that's about it. I probably went on way too long. It's a solid show. If you don't like Nick Cage, or you don't like it when he kind of overacts, I think the show's going to lose you. But if you're into that, and you like this detective stuff and that noir feel, and you like, you know, a little bit of superhero stuff thrown in, it's a pretty good show. I mean, there's nothing wrong with watching it in black and white or color, whichever one you like. I think they both got benefits. I think it was really meant to be in black and white, but there's no reason that you have to watch it that way if that's not what you like. But that's it. Like I said, I got the mostly spoiler-free version of this review up. I got some other TV show reviews. I got some movie reviews. I got a comic strip that I do. All that's over at soundofbettermyhead.com. So if you want to check that stuff out, that's great. And other than that, thanks for watching.